You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
The only U.S. degree-granting university on the continent presented that opportunity to really pursue a career here on the continent to help advance the digital transformation and the education of the next generation of talent. How can Africa shift from consumers of technology to creators of technology, not only for the continent itself, but also an exporter of technologies and innovations globally? If we could cultivate, and it's not just at CMU Africa, but across the continent, just this culture of mobility and international engagement, it does several things.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we explore the innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. Today, we are unlocking a powerful, essential part of Africa's development story, the future of science, technology, and education, and how world-class skills and research can drive the continent's next wave of transformation. My guest today is Conrad Tucker, Director of Carnegie Mellon University Africa, the only United States research university with a full-time presence on the continent. Under his leadership, CMU Africa continues to shape a new generation of African innovators, engineers, and technology leaders. Professor Conrad, welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. And again, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, Tessa. Thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. As always, I like to start from the very beginning. So give us an introduction into who you are and how you came about doing the work that you're doing through CMU Africa.
Great. So I'm Conrad Soba Tucker. The middle name Soba is Sierra Leonean, means third born. I was born in Sierra Leone. And in the mid-90s, at the height of the Sierra Leonean Civil War, my family and I were able to escape and eventually make our way to the U.S., where I spent a majority of my teenage and adult life at various stages of education and full-time employment. I have always had a passion and a vision of returning back to the continent at some point. And CMU, with its location in Pittsburgh, with the only U.S. degree-granting university on the continent, just presented that opportunity while I'm pursuing my career to really pursue a career here on the continent to help advance the digital transformation and the education of the next generation of talent on the continent. So it's a pleasure joining you from Kigali, Rwanda. It's called CMU Africa for a reason. While we may be in Rwanda, we are open to the entire continent. So we have students from over 25 nationalities across the continent, and we're looking to even expand that number. So a pleasure being here again, and love to delve deeper into any of these topics as you would like.
Fantastic. You've given us a nice overview of your private and professional life, which has led you to the work that you're doing now through CMU. Before we dive into, I guess, the exciting innovations happening at CMU Africa, I'd love to begin by grounding listeners in the institution itself. CMU Africa was established in partnership with the government of Rwanda, hence why you're in Kigali. It was there to address the shortage of high-quality engineering talent on the continent. So from your perspective, how well do you believe the institution is delivering on that original mandate?
I would just like to emphasize the vision of the Rwandan government at the highest levels. You know, President Kagame himself inaugurated this building that I am sitting here doing this podcast.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we're supported across the ministries and at the highest levels of the Rwandan government. And I think it's important to emphasize that because it speaks to a nation and a people who see their future and the future of the continent deeply integrated with high quality education. And that's absolutely critical because when you look at countries and civilizations that have moved from one socioeconomic status to higher, it's always centered around education and innovation. And so we're very fortunate to be here. Specifically relating to your question, how well we're doing, it started literally from an idea. And fast forward a little over a decade later, we now have students from over 20 plus African countries, totaling over 330 students physically here on campus. It's partitioned into 3 master's programs, a master's in information technology, electrical engineering, and our most recent program, engineering artificial intelligence. And so we see a lot of growth to come.
As you mentioned, it started from scratch with over 320 students from 26 African countries, with 31% of them being women. So that's a nice mix, nice diversity. So how is CMU Africa intentionally building that pipeline of diverse, future technology leaders?
It's really, and if we ask ourselves why the focus specifically on the STEM and core technology areas, when you look at the world and where economic value is heavily skewed towards, it's in the IT and engineering sector. And so how can Africa shift from a continent of consumers of technology to creators of technology, not only for the continent itself in solving Africa's pressing challenges, but also an exporter of technologies and innovations globally? Because then you start getting foreign direct investment, start getting capital, you start elevating the middle to upper class, which then has the ripple effects on a overall positive impact on societies. So to achieve all this, we focus on deep tech education, research, and also the transition of some of these education and research projects into supporting startups here at CMU Africa. So we have an in-house incubator of over 20 startups that we're looking to grow in the coming years.
So if we keep on the theme of the students who are enrolled at CMU, I know that one of the most interesting facts that I read is that 85% of your graduates actually end up working on the continent, which is amazing. But what factors do you believe contribute to that strong retention rate?
It is multifaceted. So yes, there's the education itself, but there's also the empowerment and the professional development so that the students from the beginning are not looking outwards and seeing CMU Africa as simply a stepping stone to the West. And so we cultivate the students to try to think of not only when they graduate, but during their time here at CMU Africa, think of sectors, organizations, problems on the continent where they can apply their world-class technical education into providing solutions. On the second dimension, we're now able to demonstrate to the world that CMU Africa is able to produce top tech talent that is comparable to our main Pittsburgh campus. And that has a ripple effect of reassuring multinational organizations, as an example. When they're hiring a CMU Africa grad, they're getting the best bang for their buck, and the quality is also consistent. Now, that's absolutely critical if we're going to grow and scale and continue to do the great work that we're doing, is maintaining the highest standards of quality and also being able to show students that when they graduate, there are indeed pathways to economic upward mobility here on the continent with them not having to necessarily go outside.
So with this in mind, what do you believe this retention rate means for the continent's economic or digital development? What can we learn from this?
Several things. It helps to fill the gap, both within government sectors, across industry and tech sectors, and that's critical. Let's take government, for example. There's a lot of talk about AI policy and AI customization for the African context. But if government decision makers are not as technically informed about how these investments and these decisions will impact their long-term and short-term future outlook, then it risks creating a disproportionate allocation of resources. So the technical talent that we're producing helps to strengthen governments by providing that deep technical expertise that can help them in decision making. For industry, it helps these industries lessen their reliance on expats or talent that is that they have to import, that is in many cases is significantly more expensive. And so you have homegrown talent that's comparable to the talent that would be imported externally, that's able to build capacity and add resilience to industries, organizations, and governments.
You mentioned the deep technical expertise that students can provide. I know the university emphasizes areas such as problem solving through experimental learning and partnerships with different industries. I was hoping you could share examples of how these collaborations actually translate to real-world impact on the continent.
So just as we're speaking today, we've had several of our startups win innovation pitch competitions from multinational organizations and hire talent that then contributes to the growth of their startups. And during the 1 or 2 years that students are here, beyond just the classroom instruction, we invest a lot in professional development and try to create a paradigm shift in the way that many students across the continent are educated, which is this either rote memorization or not necessarily having this constant need to ask why and challenge the status quo. And for those who are entrepreneurs, we know that that's one of the key ingredients, is asking why or why not. And so those are the dimensions, in addition to the world-class education, that we cultivate in our students, that then translates into them getting hired here on the continent, them wanting to stay on the continent. And many of them have offers abroad and they choose to work on the continent, and them also being competitive in PhD programs. So we're just primarily a master's program. Another measure of success that we're doing the right things are when our graduates apply to the world-class PhD programs, both on the continent and outside, and they're very competitive in those areas as well.
You noted that the students are able to attend major international conferences. So how do you believe this type of exposure shapes the quality of the talent emerging from CMU?
So currently, as we speak, we have a team of students and a couple of faculty from CMU Africa at one of the world's top AI conferences, NeurIPS. It's being held in California. And if we could cultivate, and it's not just at CMU Africa, but across the continent, just this culture of mobility and international engagement, it does several things. First, it helps to validate to the students themselves that the work that they're doing is globally valuable and globally recognized. And that's very important. The second is that it expands their network of future collaborators from a research project, but also collaborators when it comes to entrepreneurship and maybe launching a business. So someone attends a conference, they maintain collaboration with a colleague somewhere half across the world. Now you have another potential location that may reduce the complexity if a company were to expand globally. So absolutely, it's important that we continue to engage and promote these engagements in international conferences.
From the conversation so far, I think you've painted a picture of CMU Africa's mission and its student economy. So I'd like to explore the engine behind this ecosystem. I know CMU Africa maintains a 95% internship placement rate, working with organizations like WHO, IBM. What do you believe makes employers trust the university's talent so much?
Let's start with, again, emphasizing who our major stakeholders are. So we have the government of Rwanda that has invested significant amount of financial resources and also infrastructure. So the building, this campus that we are currently in, was built by the government of Rwanda. We also have our major stakeholder, the MasterCard Foundation, that has enabled CMU Africa to amplify the impact of our work across the continent. So through funding from the MasterCard Foundation, we've now established a first of its kind engineering network called the Afritech Network. And that is being led by CMU Africa, but in close partnership with key universities, like-minded universities across the continent. We have the University of Rwanda as one of our partners, University of Nairobi in Kenya. We have Wits University in South Africa. We have the American University of Cairo. We have Agostinho Neto University in Angola, University of Cheikh Anta Diop University in Senegal, Al Ahwan University in Morocco, and the University of Lagos in Nigeria. And the plan is to grow and add to that network, but we're very selective in terms of who, and if you plot these out, you'll see that it's very nicely geographically dispersed across the continent. And to your question, this ability to create this Pan-African network from scratch that is helping to advance the digital transformation helps to reinforce the trust that the organizations that you have outlined have in CMU Africa. We're able to educate students, we're able to foster partnerships, and we're able to bring the continent closer together because we need to collaborate if we're going to be successful.
If we zoom in and look at CMU's work and research, which focuses on areas such as AI, robotics, cybersecurity, energy, and ICT, which of these areas do you believe will most significantly accelerate Africa's economic development?
So that's a tough question because first there's an interconnectivity of those areas. I guess maybe if we look at what has succeeded in Africa or what is the opportunity for these technologies, it's really leapfrogging what has become global standards. So in the same way that Africa didn't have to significantly invest resources in landline infrastructure and went straight to mobile phones, how can AI, for example, apply to education, maybe reduce the number of physical schools that are needed in place for a hybrid model where AI education assistants in collaboration and support of professors help to scale the quality of education across the continent. Again, we're doubling down on education because without deep tech, and we try to use the word education instead of training. One observation on the continent is far too often there's this capacity building, training, and what we've found is that those are short courses, 1 week sessions. It's very hard to be convinced that someone can become an AI expert that's going to create the next what comes after LLMs with a capacity building initiative. Now, that's not to say that there isn't use and value in these initiatives. What we're saying is that in addition to these initiatives, there is a significant need for deep tech research and education. And that's what we're trying to do with our network.
If we look even closer and focus specifically on your work in AI and robotics research, from what you've seen so far, what do you believe are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that exist specifically when developing AI for local context?
So removing my administrative hat on as a faculty member, my area of research is in machine learning for engineering, design, and healthcare. I have a research lab in Pittsburgh. In fact, I was a faculty member in Pittsburgh before relocating to Kigali. And when I contrast the infrastructure needs, there's of course, the hardware GPU infrastructure that's needed for training AI models. There's the energy infrastructure that's needed to power these data centers and GPU factories. There's the high network infrastructure, fiber optics or high-speed wireless. And then on top of this stack, there's the technical expertise that's needed to train people who then train models. And so this entire stack is needed if we're claiming to be educating or applying AI for specific use cases. They don't necessarily have to all come at the same time. They don't all necessarily have to be on the continent at the same time. So I think it would be unrealistic to assume that Africa can compete with the hundreds of billions of dollars that are being currently poured into AI data centers in the US and elsewhere. But with the resources we have, with the technical talent that we have, how can we leverage infrastructure at scale, maybe external to the continent? How can we leverage infrastructure on the continent to maybe the infrastructure on the continent serves as a pilot test bed that is then scaled out through infrastructure externally. So I think the ecosystem is absolutely needed when we talk about AI. And far too often, the association is AI is just ChatGPT and you type in something. There's an entire infrastructure and talent pipeline behind everything that we see there.
Alongside the work that you're doing in talent development, I think it's clear that CMU Africa is also becoming a hub for entrepreneurship, innovation on the continent. So let's talk about how you're turning ideas into scalable African solutions. I know you recently partnered with MBA Africa. Can you talk us through that partnership?
Sure. So we are excited to be hosting the MBA Africa's flagship entrepreneurship competition event here on the CMU Africa campus in Kigali tomorrow. And it's a highly competitive process of reviewing tech startups that are specifically focused on sports solutions and narrowing them down, where tomorrow the finalists will be pitching their tech-driven sports solutions, and a subset of those pitches will then join the CMU Africa 12-month entrepreneurship incubation program. And what that allows these startups to do is be introduced and exposed to CMU Africa's entrepreneurship training, successful entrepreneurs both within the continent and outside, workshops, venture capital funding, and just the overall ecosystem of tech partners. So we're very excited to be partnering with MBA Africa on this flagship event.
Thank you for sharing that. So I was wondering, why did you choose to engage in sports industry innovation, and what outcomes do you expect from this partnership?
So we hope that across the continent, we expand how we think about talent. What we've observed is if you are a mechanical engineer, for example, or a physicist, and the next thing people see you in the financial markets, they may scratch their head. This is very common practice in the West and in other parts of the world, where the emphasis is less on what does it say on your degree and more on what does your talent provide you to contribute to an organization. So when it comes to sports, beyond just the game itself, sports has become a significant, heavily driven tech industry, from the significant amount of performance data that is captured by athletes and how they train and how their physiology maps to performance and how the food they eat impacts their physiology. There's a whole science around optimizing athlete performance that has very little to do with the game itself. And this is an opportunity for a significant amount of data to be generated that can then be used to develop solutions to help athletes and to make the overall industry more interesting and competitive to watch. There are other technologies such as wearables that could have a dual use. So yes, maybe you develop a low-cost technology to monitor an athlete's heart rate, respiration, and other physiological signals. While this may be born out of the sports industry, this could very easily then be applied to healthcare, the elderly, individuals suffering or recovering from certain neurological diseases. And so now we start to see that sports innovations are actually innovations in technology, period. And those are some of what we're hoping to achieve, is to just change this narrow mindset that, oh, this is a sports education or sports opportunity. It must be about playing soccer or basketball or football. No, it's here are technologies that help people perform to their best.
A recurring theme in CMU Africa's story is collaboration. Partners such as the government of Rwanda, MasterCard Foundation play significant roles in student support or progression. How critical would you say these partnerships are specifically in scaling the impact and the accessibility?
Let's start with the government of Rwanda. I would argue that the presence of CMU Africa has scaled the impact of what CMU as a university has been able to do. So now we have a presence on the youngest population in the world, being able to learn and adapt and customize solutions that positively impact millions of people across the continent. So the government of Rwanda partnership itself is a scaling of what CMU as a university is able to do. When it comes to the MasterCard Foundation, this has enabled CMU Africa to scale in a Pan-African way. And for those who are familiar with the MasterCard Foundation's mission and focus, is really on young people and economic opportunities for millions of youth across the continent. And this is very well aligned with CMU's mission of positive impact. CMU conducts fundamental research, but we also conduct research that matters. That's not just publishing a paper, but how are we positively impacting people's lives and societies. So I think the alignment in values, vision, and mission from the beginning have been very strong. And so we're very thankful for those partnerships.
Earlier, you touched on the Afritech network, which is led by CMU Africa, which is driving inclusive digital transformation through I believe, a Pan-African consortium. What does collaboration at this scale unlock for the continent?
It unlocks best practices. It unlocks updating perceptions. In many of these universities that I mentioned earlier, the creation of the Afritech network was the first time that they have had meaningful partnerships with other universities in Africa. And in many cases, just like our students, the starting point was looking outside the continent. And so there's been a paradigm shift in what we can do by sharing best practices and collaborating across three pillars: teaching and learning. And so that's what online program works for you. Can we apply that here in our university or scale across our programs? How are your faculty upskilled when it comes to AI? Can we maybe borrow those modules, or can those modules be relevant to us? So that's one pillar in teaching and learning. The other pillar, knowledge creation, is focused on helping the network collaborate on seeding research projects. So this is, again, enabling universities that typically don't work on research together to collaboratively come together. And one of the requirements of these seed grants is that there have to be multiple Afrotech members as a condition to even applying. So it creates this bottoms up organic way for researchers across these universities to collaboratively think of relevant research questions that have impact on the continent, work on competitive proposals, and get funding for one or multiple years to seed these projects that we then hope can scale through other funding resources. The last pillar is the pathways to opportunity. So this is really asking the question of how are we educating our students so that they could start their own companies, be the most competitive when it comes to industry hiring, or the most competitive when it comes to further pursuing advanced degrees such as a PhD. So those are the three pillars, and that's how the network collaborates.
Interesting. The university is based in Kigali Innovation City, which provides a environment where academia, industry, and government intersect. How do you believe this ecosystem accelerates technology development and also, most importantly, the commercialization of this technology?
Yeah, I mean, this is really adapting to what has worked globally. It's when you go to Pittsburgh, you see CMU that is working very closely with the Pittsburgh industry and VC ecosystem that has strong support by the local, state, and federal governments. You go to Silicon Valley, you see something similar. And the special economic zone here in Kigali has those ingredients where we have CMU Africa as one of the anchor tenants of the special economic zone. And we have a nice flourishing of companies across different scales, whether or not it's startups or well-established companies such as we have Volkswagen down the road. They have an assembly plant here. We have BioNTech. When we look outside our window, they have one of the continent's first COVID mRNA vaccine manufacturing initiatives here in Rwanda. So shortly, what is being built is really this ecosystem of the intellectual capacity, which is what we focus on, and the R&D. We have the industry that we work closely with through internships and startups. But then we have the strong support of the government. And I can't emphasize the importance of the environment, right? I mean, we're asking students and staff and faculty to leave wherever they were in this world to move to Kigali, Rwanda, to live here. And wouldn't be possible if the ecosystem and environment in the country and the policies weren't conducive to promoting everything that I just explained. So our hope is that Rwanda serves as an example of what's possible across the continent. Of if you build it, they will come. If you build the right environment, then everything that we're doing here can scale across the continent.
As we wrap up, I'd like to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the future of African talent, the future of industries, and the role CMU Africa could potentially play. I know we know Africa has the world's fastest growing workforce. I was wondering, how is CMU Africa preparing students not only to secure jobs, but to create jobs and build industries for the future?
It really starts with a mindset change, a paradigm shift in just how we think about our purpose and what we're doing here. If all we were doing was to educate students who go out and get a job and they have their nice salary and that wouldn't be a transformative mission. We're educating the next generation of tech leaders. And when you look at the characteristics of good leadership, these are individuals who have a vision. These are individuals who are selfless, who are humble, who understand the value of collaboration, who think of others and make efforts to pull others up. And all of those ingredients are what we're trying to instill within our students, both when they're here and when they graduate, so that when they do become the job creators, they grow those organizations with the same value and the same paying it forward mentality that will help this continent grow. We started off this podcast by sharing. I shared my personal experience of how I left the continent and was inspired to come back, primarily because I visited Rwanda, actually, to be honest, about 6 years ago. But what I didn't explain in detail was when we were escaping the war in Sierra Leone and driving through the wreckage, there were so many young child soldiers who were part of this conflict, to no fault of their own, had found themselves in these dire situations. And my concern for the continent moving forward, we tout this, we're the youngest population globally. Yes, that's true. But if we don't do something meaningful with the youth very quickly, I mean, it's not even, we don't even have time. This young population that we tout could either become the greatest opportunity of intellectual contributions and production, or the greatest liability where they are unfortunately manipulated and exploited to engage and do bad things. Let us not repeat the history and the mistakes of the past. Let us scale the focus and investment of governments, organizations, and people so that we invest in our young people and provide them the economic upward mobility. Because if we don't do that, then other actors that may not have their best interests may come in.
Thank you for sharing that. So if we keep on the theme of doing something meaningful for the youth, as we've discussed today at length, your aim is to produce globally competitive talent with locally relevant skills. So how would you balance the global excellence with the contextual African realities in your curriculum design?
We're always starting with global in mind. And that's absolutely important because we are a global university. We are uncompromising in our global standards, and we want solutions to be inspired and maybe born out of a problem in Rwanda or in Africa. But we want those solutions to, if another country or another peoples have similar challenges, to be able to scale and export those solutions around the world. You know, we drive around the continent and many cars are built from somewhere in Asia. But the Asian market, you know, if you take the Japanese vehicles, they didn't say, well, how do we build a car for Japan? It's like, how do we build the best solution from point A to point B? And that's what we're trying to do. How do we build the best solution that may be inspired by the African context, but the best solution that's applicable globally?
Looking forward in terms of what you see for the continent's future, if you had to articulate maybe one key lever that will unlock Africa's economic and technological potential in the next 20 years, specifically based on what you've seen at CMU Africa, what would it be?
That's a difficult question. Just one.
Maybe give me a couple. I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, everything we've discussed wouldn't have been possible without good governance. It just wouldn't. The trust in the country and the system and the how that de-risks. And that would be my plea to other governments across the continent to learn from what has succeeded here and move with a sense of urgency so that we don't miss out on the fourth industrial revolution. Because if we do miss out on this industrial revolution, it might be too late. So I would say governance is one. There needs to be a cultural assessment. A lot of people say we don't have enough engineers on the continent. That's true, but I would argue we don't have enough philosophers. We need to move more to a questioning mindset, and that requires a culture change that starts at the very early stages of our lives, to encourage children to ask questions, to not stifle their intellectual curiosity, to encourage in classrooms at universities, if a student is quiet in class, just asking the question, what is your opinion? How often do we ask that question? What is your opinion? And let that individual think critically about their thoughts and have the confidence to intellectually engage. And so I think if those two things, the governance and promoting this intellectual curiosity and critical thinking, the other things will come.
Yes. So if we look closer to home, as Africa's only United States research university with a full presence on the continent, what does success look like for CMU Africa over the next 5 to 10 years?
So success looks like when you go to other universities all across the continent, that there's a standardization of global quality and where students don't see CMU Africa as a big deal. I mean, I know that I'm here, and it's an ambitious target because it means that we should benchmark ourselves and strive for global standards, not only for CMU Africa, but for the local universities all across the continent, so that we have free mobility. A student from CMU Africa, instead of aspiring to go to University X outside the continent, or a student from Nigeria, when you ask them, oh, where are you going for your PhD? They say, oh, I'm going to University of Nairobi. That's part of this Afrotech network. That is a measure of success. When we're looking inward, when we have attained the same level or higher of quality on research, education, entrepreneurship, where students don't see external as a big deal anymore.
Fantastic. Last question.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
I tend to have more than one thing, but okay. The quote: if anyone ever has the opportunity to visit CMU Africa, the quote on my door at my office here is, "Peace has cost you your strength. Victory has defeated you." And that is from Bane, the villain in the movie The Dark Knight Rises.
Fantastic.
And people ask me, why do you have like a movie quote? And to me, when I walk to the office every morning and I look at that quote, it's a reminder. And if anyone watches that, has seen that movie, you see that Batman got woefully defeated. And it's a reminder of not being complacent and not taking one success as the end of the finish line. And for me, what that inspires me to do every day is to continue to aspire and to push the boundaries, both for myself, for the organization, and for the people I come across that I want to have a positive impact on them. Always strive for more and don't be complacent with mediocrity.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, Professor Conrad. Thank you for joining us today. That has been an extremely thought-provoking conversation. It's clear that CMU Africa is not just an academic institution, but also a catalyst for talent, innovation, and opportunity across the continent. So thank you for your time. I know you've been extremely busy, but thank you for taking the time out to join us today.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure, Teresa, for having me, and wishing you and all of your listeners success, and together let's make things happen. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.